What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. It is week 3, celebrating John Maxwell's League of Extraordinary Leaders. And with me for today's episode is Tim Elmore. Tim has worked with John Maxwell's team for 20 years. He is the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders, a nonprofit organization created to develop emerging leaders. Since 2003, he has spoken to more than 500,000 leaders in businesses, universities, high schools, athletic teams, and nonprofit organizations. He is the author of 37 books. Yes, I said 37. And his most recent release was a big deal because it was the first book written by someone other than John Maxwell to be published under the John Maxwell imprint.
This is a great assignment that really helps me do the confidence humility thing. When I'm in a meeting with a group of people, I need to speak as if I believe I'm right with a bit of confidence, but I need to listen as if I believe I'm wrong. That makes me curious. That makes me listen better rather than just wait for my next turn to say something. So I have been challenged this year by that. It makes me a teacher and a learner, at the same time. Has really been a game changer for me.
Tim, thanks for joining us.
Oh, Don, I love every minute I get to spend with you. We're going to have fun.
Ditto. I have to tell you, whether it's in airports or on, at events where we get a chance to share the stage, each time I'm always looking for that private time because I feel so much kindred spirit with you. But this is going to expand that opportunity. I'm really excited because in late 2021, our mutual friend, your longtime mentor and partner, John Maxwell, made a major announcement. He shared that he's making some shifts in his long-term business model, which has largely been built on his persona.
Yeah.
And he's going to add some new voices to his team that are aligned around a philosophy rather than a persona. He dubbed these 5 new voices the League of Extraordinary Leaders. I think it's really funny. I can only imagine the capes and the shields that you get and all kinds of good stuff.
That's right.
But you're one of the rock stars.
Yeah. I started with John in 1983, so I was just a little bit out of college. I look back with such gratitude, Don, because I didn't feel like I had to unlearn a lot of bad leadership habits. I was with Maxwell. And John doesn't claim to be perfect, but he just knew intuitively how to lead, persuade, influence, and reach a goal. I feel like he accelerated my journey. But Don, I gotta be honest with you. The thing I appreciate most about John was, you just mentioned those private moments we get. I have loved those private moments I've gotten with John. Clearly, he's the mentor. I'm the mentee. I'll never forget a trip to India. It was just him and me. We were teaching leaders in Calcutta and, it was Madras back then, but Chennai, that sort of thing. And John was up on the stage. And at that time, I was sitting in the front row, kind of working his overhead slides. Remember overhead projectors and slides? This is how old we are. But here's what I love. John got finished, standing ovation. So I stand up too. I love this guy too, but I'm the overhead guy. John's got people swarming the stage. It's like he's a rock star. They want to touch him. They want to get his autograph. They want to get a photo. But John pushes his way down to where I am and says, "How are your blood sugars?" I'm a diabetic. And he was asking how I was doing. So instead of getting caught up in the moment, this rock star where he could have just basked in the limelight, John's asking me about how my blood sugars are as a diabetic, because my wife had asked him, "Hey, since it's just you and Tim, can you look out for my husband?" And I thought, oh my gosh, this guy's got 1,000 other things on his mind. And yet he's asking me how I'm doing. So that's the man we've joined.
I do have to tell you, I think that everything about John Maxwell says, if you can be in relationship, be in relationship because you will never regret it.
Yeah,
My father used to tell me all the time, you can never do bad business with good people.
that's good.
And that is an absolute here when we talk about that. I want to ask you a little sporting questions. I know you ran track in high school.
Yep.
Sometimes track appears to other people as a very individual sport, but at that level, you're also working for team victory. Can you share a story from early athletic endeavors that you still think about today? Something that impacted you?
That's a great question. I'll tell you what comes to mind. It was the high school track team, and I was learning what team meant. There is no I in team. We've heard that cliche now for over and over and over. There was a teammate named Tom. I won't share his last name because he may be listening right now. And we're doing qualifications. Only a few are going to qualify to be in the big county meet and then the state meet. And I was a distance runner. So we're running the track over and over and over. And Tom ducks behind the bleachers because he's tired. And he just catches his breath, hiding from the coaches and the guys that are doing the stopwatch. And then on the final lap of the race, Don, he jumps back in, well rested and ready to go. Well, he passes us all up and he qualifies for the meet. We are all so ticked off, but none of us ratted him out. We didn't want to say, Coach, he just ducked behind the bleachers. You just don't do that as a teenager. But I watched the ramifications because Tom really didn't qualify legally and officially. He got in that big meet with these very fast runners. He's vomiting halfway through the meet because he didn't really do the work. He took a shortcut. And I'm thinking, that's a picture of what we all want to do. Don't we love shortcuts? In fact, I think human beings, our brains are hardwired to look for shortcuts. I don't think it's bad, but I think there's a place in life where you go, I better not take a shortcut here because it's not going to pay off. As Maxwell says, shortcuts don't pay off in the long run.
That's a great, great lesson. I think about that Boston Marathon lady, Rosie, whatever her name is, that did the same thing. But she ends up actually winning the Boston Marathon, being crowned and then being run out of racing forever because she was a fraud.
Yeah. Well, I tell you where it plays out in my life. I just figure I got to put in the work. I've got to do the stuff behind the scenes because it's going to show up in public, good or bad.
Right.
And because I'm either writing as you are or speaking as you often are, it's easy for me to do a Q&A session or to be speaking for that matter to an audience and know that I could throw out a story that's just a little exaggerated, just a little bit hyperbolic. And I remember thinking to myself, each time I do this, if my wife was in the audience, would I start going down this road? I would not. And Pam and I adore each other. We've been married 40 years now, but I'm telling you, that's my check and balance. I want to make sure that I'm truthful when I'm sharing, that this is not an exaggeration or an outright lie. So that's one way. But Don, I tell you what, the lesson I keep learning over and over and over is the very first lesson that I feel like I learned in my 20s. And that is the first person I lead is me. I've got to do self-leadership. If I don't do that well, I really don't deserve to be followed by others. As silly and cliche and simple as it sounds, I think that's the one I return to over and over and over.
I love that. Such a powerful lesson. This is an audio only podcast, though we do clip this recording because we use some parts of it in social media. So those who are only listening on audio track don't know that you're wearing a West Point hoodie right now.
Yeah.
Both of us, we've done work up at West Point. Mm-hmm. And when you spend time there, that is lesson one. What do they expect from first year cadets? The most important person you're going to lead this year, learn to lead yourself.
That's right.
And the next year you get to lead one other person and then it grows. But year one is always lead yourself.
Yeah.
Powerful, powerful lesson. And if you're leading yourself and taking shortcuts, boy.
The bad combination.
Absolutely. As a teammate, you mentioned that you saw Tom.
Yeah.
Or Tom with no last name. But as a team, you all collectively chose not to rat him out.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were just learning what it meant to be part of a team. Any team lesson in all of those experiences that you might share?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. Some of the habitudes that we have developed at Growing Leaders that I've developed, these are images that teach a principle just with a picture, really got their genesis when I was playing sports, high school sports. I wasn't a D1 college player, but I remember my first 18 years playing sports. So the whole idea of rivers and floods became very real to me. Rivers and floods are both bodies of water. The big difference is floods are water going in every direction randomly and almost always doing damage. Rivers are water flowing in one direction. They can be leveraged to do a lot of good. I find that most people are flooding, not flowing. They're floods, not rivers. They're fuzzy, not focused. So I realized the only way I'm going to add value is if I stay on point with exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. If I execute my job, I better enable the others on the team to execute their job, but had to be a river, not a flood. Here's another one that was incubated in my high school years, Don: thermostats and thermometers.
Boy, I was just getting ready to ask you. This is my favorite of your habitudes. It's one I talk to my kids about all the time. It's so good.
Ah, that's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to spend the next little bit here talking about, if you don't mind, sharing a few habitudes and the genesis of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So thermostats and thermometers, it's probably something, listeners, that you've thought of before, but these two instruments, the thermometer and the thermostat, both have to do with the temperature. The big difference, of course, is one can only tell you what the climate is. The other one actually sets the climate. Most of us, I think, enter a community, a team, a group as thermometers. We're just looking around, trying not to do something stupid. Just, what do I do here? What do I do here? Those of us who choose to be influencers step over the line and say, I'm going to be a thermostat. I'm going to set the temperature on this team. A number of years ago, I got to meet Jason Biles. He is the director of performance at the Houston Rockets. And he started using habitudes with the team there. So he and I would stay in touch. And how's it going? How's it going? The team was enjoying them, but it was so fun to hear how that was their favorite habitude. I mean, James loves Discipline Bridge and thermostats and thermometers. And that was the one that he latched onto. That's become one I taught to my children. That's the one I feel like I had to learn to embody. And of course, under Maxwell, I just realized very rapidly, you're influencing everywhere you go. You don't have to have a title or a badge. You're rubbing off on people, bad or good, all the time. So that's an important one.
All right, give me the bridge.
Okay, Discipline Bridge. It's a great photograph, by the way, of a bridge. But we basically say almost anywhere you need to get to or you want to get to in life, you're going to have to cross a bridge called discipline. You're not going to win the lottery. You're not going to get lucky, or maybe you will, but it's 1 in a million, that sort of thing. And really, we're trying to condition next generation leaders to think this way. Don't think luck. Don't think chance. Don't think it's who you know. If I just know the cousin of so-and-so, then I'm going to have to get ready to cross this bridge called discipline.
Right.
As I started to embody that one, Don, I stopped listening all the time to myself and started talking to myself. That's a huge lesson. Now, as a diabetic, I need to listen to my body. I need to, sometimes my blood sugars are low. But boy, if you just go all day just listening to how you're feeling, listening to what you're thinking, we're not thinking right half the time. We need to tell ourselves how to think. And of course, that's a lesson for our children as well. But Discipline Bridge is just a great reminder all the time. We have these hung up all over our office, these pictures.
I mean, right behind you is a flood.
That's right. Yeah.
Every time I've been in your presence, every time I've listened to you present, I walk away with one of these. I come back, my kids are over me telling them all these things. So the fact that I can blame it on you works out really well.
That's right. By the way, I love the school your kids go to. It was so fun to be with the faculty and the student leaders. I just need to stop and tell you, thanks for paving the way for that. It was just great. It's a good school. It really is a good school.
Well, thank you. I know that they're grateful for the kind of lessons you lead too. When you talk about habitudes, you turned it from a series of really cool and wonderful little phrases into a training system. That's a bridge in its own.
Yeah.
Because we've all got pithy quotes. I have them hanging all over my office, mostly from John Wooden.
Right.
Okay, so you take that quote. Now, how do I apply it? Give me some lesson that I can teach others on how to take something they've learned and begin the process of application.
One of the reasons I'm a believer in using imagery to communicate is because we think in pictures. We just do. Most people, not all, but most. If I say the word elephant to you, you don't picture the letters E-L-E-P-H, you picture a big gray animal. I think that's just how God wired our brain. If that's going to stick in your head, why not stick good pictures in your head, not bad ones? So I think a picture when it's shown, and maybe just a little bit of a description, like I gave just a minute ago for thermostats or rivers or whatever, starts a conversation because pictures are worth 1,000 words. So whenever I have a coach or teacher using these images, I say, don't make it a lecture. This is not you explaining something for an hour. Pictures beat lectures. Pictures beat lectures. Explain it for a moment, but then let them talk. What engages listeners is when they get to tell what they're thinking when they see a river or flood. Maybe they went through a flood when they were 17 years old in their neighborhood or whatever. But then once you begin to chew on this, Don, I'm telling you, just my experience, it almost always leads to application.
Mm.
You see it, you feel it, you start talking about it, and it almost invites, well, what do we do about this? If you tend to be a flood, what do you need to do? Well, I need boundaries. The banks of a river are the boundaries. Okay, what do you need? Well, I need a set of values. Values will help me say no to going every direction. I need accountability partners. That's going to help me say no to some, that sort of thing. I'm not saying it's magical and it just happens, but I think the picture itself invites both thought and feeling and almost always leads to application. So the very first NCAA team we worked with was the Texas football team, University of Texas football team, back when Mac Brown was the head coach.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, so that's how old I am. It was 2007, 2008. Colt McCoy was just coming up through the ranks, but they had some real trouble on the team. I think they had 7 arrests in September alone. Not just character flaws, guys that were thrown in jail. So we got called and they said, do you have these habitudes for athletes? Well, we can. They'll be useful. So we were sending DVDs 1 week at a time out to Texas so they'd have conversation. But deadlines are lifelines.
Right.
So the deadlines forced us to send them out. So here's what's really cool. Colt McCoy latched onto them as a college student. He was a quarterback, if you remember, the Texas Longhorn football team.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Sharp young man. When I was out there one time, he said, this is my favorite habitude. This has been our problem. If we don't win, it's not because we don't have enough talent. It's because we don't have enough focus. I'll never forget the day. I'm like a 12-year-old kid, even though I could be his dad. He sends me a football that says, stay a river, not a flood. And I just thought, this kid has got it. Those are the rewards of stuff you and I get to do, is when they latch onto a concept and they don't let loose of it even into adulthood.
I have to tell you, for us, we often kind of talk about third column thinking. First column is often, I will remember something that you've learned from a story. The second is, how will you apply it?
Yeah.
But we think the application gains a lot more strength when you get into that third column and you actually note, if you apply it, what will it impact and improve?
Yeah.
Then your application or your willingness to apply grows exponentially.
Absolutely.
You've written 37 books.
Yes, I have.
But your most recent one is The 8 Paradoxes of Great Leadership. It was a big deal for you to do this book, not just because it was another book for you to have achieved, but because you're the first author other than John Maxwell to have been published through the John Maxwell imprint.
Yeah.
What a big honor.
It was. Yeah.
These 8 paradoxes really fascinated me. I heard you share them on a stage in Atlanta just recently. But these ideas of the challenges that we as leaders face, can you maybe walk us through a couple?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we live in an either or world. It's just polarized right now. You're left or you're right. You're progressive or conservative. You're this or you're that. And it just seems ridiculous because most of life is not black and white. There's a lot of both and. So I began to watch leaders that I felt like were uncommon and effective. And I noticed they were actually combining paradoxical or seemingly contradictory ideas. 8 Paradoxes of Great Leadership is really a book about 8. There may be 8,000 of these things, but I found 8 that I thought, these are the ones that I see great leaders practicing. The first one in the book is, I think uncommon leaders are both confident and humble. Now, very often you have one or the other. You have a very humble leader that you're drawn to, but you kind of wonder, are we going to get to the goal or not? We're nice, or you have a very confident leader that you go, wow, he's confident, maybe a little overconfident. Maybe he's not looking under every rock, that sort of thing. Well, on each one of these chapters, I have a case study. And my case study on this one was Bob Iger of the Disney enterprise.
Right. Absolutely.
Bob comes in as CEO of Disney following Michael Eisner. And if I can just be very forthright here, Michael's a great leader. I don't know him, but I know he's a great leader. You can't lead Disney without being a great leader. But he had become very bombastic, a little bit arrogant. In fact, so much so that the board pushed him out. You're not our people anymore. So Bob comes in knowing, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm doing. Here's how he described his first days at Disney. You have to be humble. You can't pretend to know something you don't or to be someone you're not. But at the same time, you can't let your humility stop you from leading. They're looking for a confident leader to say, let's go,
Right.
So what was rare about Bob was he came in and started asking questions of the very team members he'll be leading. Can you imagine how weird that is, especially for males with our ego? Hey, tell me what should we do here? So Michael Eisner had been dialoguing with Steve Jobs about Disney purchasing Pixar, and it always reached an impasse, never worked out. Quite frankly, because it was two egos just butting heads.
One had to have the upper hand before it was over.
Exactly. And I'm sure they're both awesome, but I'm telling you, it was two egos. Bob comes in, lets the dust settle, lets a little time pass, but then he contacts Steve Jobs and he says, Steve, I know you and Michael were talking about this, and I know you reached an impasse. And I know this sounds like a crazy idea, but when I think about working with you, I just can't help but think we might not be better together. And Steve Jobs says, that's not a crazy idea. But you see how that humility of leaning in caused Steve to lean in. Whenever we lead with humility, no matter how confident we may feel, it invites people to go, well, no, you're good. And so they start dialoguing. What happened? Disney purchases Pixar. After Disney purchases Pixar, they turn around and put Pixar in charge of all Disney animation. So I bought you. Now would you tell us what to do? That is confidence and humility. And I think right now, in this strange time we're in, we've got to be this.
Don't we need that?
Yeah.
We interviewed Joel Manby as part of this League of Leaders month. And, Joel tells the story about when he's at SeaWorld actually having to realize that they were falling apart, and he had to go dialogue with an organization that didn't necessarily want SeaWorld to continue to exist.
That's right.
And when they both stopped monologuing at each other and actually dialoguing with each other, they found common ground. They found a way to save the enterprise and actually make it better. Confidence and humility at the same time.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And the paradoxes just continued. Is there another that really stood out to you as a favorite?
Yeah. Well, one that seems extra oxymoronic.
Extra oxymoronic.
Yeah. Have you heard that one before? I don't think you have.
Never.
Yeah. The one that just seems to confound people, but I know it's true, is this. Uncommon leaders leverage both their vision and their blind spots. That's one that people say, no, blind spots are bad. Vision is good. Don, I don't know what your experience has been, but whenever I talk to a brilliant leader, one that I look at and go, oh my gosh, she's brilliant. He's brilliant. Almost every one of them go, oh my gosh, did I have blind spots? In fact, had I known then what I know now, I would have never started this whole thing, But it was the blind spots that enable us to approach the goal in a very fresh way. So my case study on this one was Sarah Blakely. Sarah lives right here in Atlanta, where I live. Sarah's the founder of Spanx, and every female that's listening would probably know this product. She started an industry called shapewear. So she's a Florida State grad, right? She was in Tallahassee back in the day, 25 years ago. Her first job out of college was selling fax machines door to door, store to store. So she's in her stockings and her high heels in the hot Florida sun. She's going, this is not going to work. So she cuts off the ends of her stockings. Now, here I am talking like I know what I'm talking about, but she creates this product. She finds a manufacturer in North Carolina to make these Spanx, but then she's faced with a dilemma. Who will distribute these? This is a brand new product that nobody's seen before. So she calls up an executive at Neiman Marcus and gets a 10-minute meeting. It's a short meeting, She goes over, sits down. 5 minutes into the meeting, Sarah realizes this is not going anywhere. This lady's heard 50 proposals today. She's not going to buy this. So Sarah stands up as a young professional and says, would you follow me? And the executive goes, beg your pardon? She said, would you follow me into the restroom? Sarah walks into the restroom. This is crazy. Right in front of her. She tries on the Spanx. Sold, immediately sold. The lady goes, this is awesome. This is her blind spot. Sarah knows that they're going to beta test this in a handful of Neiman Marcus stores across the country, finds out where they're going, calls up all of her friends in those cities and says, I'm going to send you some money, buy out all the Spanx in those cities. She kind of does a pay to play, and it works. So Neiman Marcus takes it nationwide, and then Bloomingdale's and other department stores pick it up. Here's the blind spot. Sometime later, Sarah's at a conference speaking about her story. And in a Q&A time, someone raises their hand and says, Miss Blakely, how did you get the attention of a major department store like Neiman Marcus at a trade show with thousands of exhibitors all around? How'd you get noticed? And she said, trade show? I never went to a trade show. Because she didn't know protocol, she didn't do the same thing everybody else would do. She found a whole lot. Thank God she had blind spots about this industry and paved the way for so many others. That's America right there. That's our country. We had a bunch of entrepreneurs, Ben Franklin. I don't know what we're doing. Let's try this, And I know I'm oversimplifying, but I think we need to recover that spirit of entrepreneurship and say, I'm going to try this. I'm not going to be stupid. And if I have a blind spot that could harm me, I'm going to pay attention. But I'm going to say, Don, when I started Growing Leaders, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Thank God I didn't, because we tried a whole new pedagogy, images. And I tell you, it's been the difference maker for us.
Boy, I love that. What a great piece of advice for all of us. Now, speaking of advice, I read a piece about advice you gave your kids. Success in school is 75% IQ, 25% EQ.
Yeah.
The ability to understand others' emotions. In life, it reverses and it becomes 75% EQ and 25% IQ. How did you come up with those ratios, and how did you teach that to them as a parent?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, it was somewhat data-based. It was our empirical evidence that we gathered through surveys in schools that we worked with a whole bunch of schools. It was also a bit anecdotal in that I thought the schools my children were going to put so much emphasis on academics. And I understand that. You know that too. You got to get good grades for sure. But I think it's been so monolithic. It's been so singularly focused on academics. You and I both know no boss, no employer is asking about your GPA at the job interview.
Thank God, by the way.
Yeah. That's right. But that's a whole nother podcast for another time. So I want to get my kids convinced, make good grades, but show me that you can be strong interpersonally, that you can play on a team and add value to the team and communicate well and listen well and lead well. We just began to underscore this because while IQ doesn't change a whole lot in our lifetime, EQ can change. We can develop it. So we began to work with our kids on EQ, and it made all the difference. They're both gainfully employed. Thank you very much.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You actually had each one of your children host a party at age 10 years old to learn how to talk to adults.
Yeah.
Because you wanted them early to start developing that EQ.
Yeah. This was so funny. So we would have dinner conversations, and they would be about habitudes. I introduced habitudes to my children way back in the day. So we're talking one night, and my son and daughter at like 8 and 12 both thought they'd mastered EQ. They go, oh yeah, we know that, and I thought, oh my gosh. So we knew the only way to really teach it is for them to do it, to have to do it. So yeah, when they were both in late elementary school, we would have a party of our adult friends. So there's several couples coming over, and our kids had to host the party. Well, at first they rolled their eyes and went, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. But eventually they had to get with it. Open the door. Hi, Mr. Johnson. Have you met Mrs. Smith? Can I take your coat? Would you like some iced tea? And I'm telling you, at the end, they were exhausted. Hosting a party is exhausting. But wasn't that all about EQ? I'm reading other people and I'm interacting, and I need to know, I need to ask them a question now. And suddenly the conversation at the next dinner was so much more robust because they realized what they didn't know.
I love that experience, pushing your kids to do that. When I read that, I threw the idea at my wife. Not sure she's convinced yet that that's a great idea, but she loved that you tried it. You teach others about how to balance this idea, this confident, humble leader, and emphasize those two qualities. But most of us feel like we have to put on that facade.
Yeah.
Social media tells us we have to put on a facade. The mask is a current phrase that a lot of people have used. What's the mask you're putting on?
Mm-hmm.
How are you coaching, leading others to take that facade down?
Well, one assignment that I've embraced this year, Don, for me at my age, I'm not a 20 something anymore, but I'm now sharing. This is a great assignment that really helps me do the confidence humility thing. When I'm in a meeting with a group of people, I need to speak as if I believe I'm right with a bit of confidence, but I need to listen as if I believe I'm wrong.
Mm.
That makes me curious. That makes me listen better rather than just wait for my next turn to say something. First of all, it blows team members away. You can imagine when Tim Elmore or Don Yeager is listening as if they believe they're wrong. Seriously,
Yeah.
you know? So I have been challenged this year by that. It makes me a teacher and a learner, at the same time. I really do think there's some practical steps in every one of these paradoxes. In fact, in every one of these chapters, I give practical steps like this. At least I try to. That's the biggie for this one that I feel like has really been a game changer for me.
Makes me a teacher and a learner at the same. Boy, I tell you, that's gold right there. I hope you don't mind. I'm like taking notes
That's
like crazy over here. So you work with athletic teams just as I do.
Mhm.
You've participated in athletics, as have I. And it's fascinating to me now in the business world, how many executives use the word team to describe their organization.
Yeah.
My team and I, me and my team, we're going to go do this.
Yeah.
But the truth is, if you really break their organization down, they are not a team.
Yeah.
They're a group of individual contributors.
Yeah.
The only thing they have in common is a business card. As a leader and as an instructor of other leaders, what are some ways you would encourage someone trying to build a team to cross that bridge, to take those individual contributors and help them do something bigger than themselves?
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think that's what every leader ought to be wrestling with. How do I turn a group into a team? The two or three thoughts that come into my mind, this will not shock you. They all have a habitude connected to them. So let me share one that I really think is a secret. Unfortunately, it's still a secret. Guide dogs and guard dogs. People have given canines lots of jobs over the years. Two of the most common ones are the guide dog, for those who are seeing impaired, and the guard dog, who protect property. The guard dog and the guide dog job are fundamentally different.
Mm-hmm.
The guard dog is in a fenced in piece of property, sniffing, growling, barking, suspicious of any intruders. The guide dog, oh my gosh, it's just the opposite. The guide dog is paired often with someone that needs guiding. I'll tell you what, I spoke in Virginia a few years ago. The one that spoke right before me on the docket was a blind man who had a guide dog. His name was Scout, and he was rightly named. Scout walked this guy up the steps to the platform, walked him across the stage, stood right next to the podium so he could grip the podium. The man made the speech, and the dog must have known what the last sentence was, because the dog stands up as he makes his last sentence, guides him off the platform, down the steps to his chair. And I thought to myself as I was watching, what a great leader. And I wasn't talking about the man. I was talking about the dog. So here's the deal, listeners. The primary job of the guard dog is to protect. The primary job of the guide dog is to partner. And I think we as human beings tend to protect naturally. We are self-protective. We hold our cards close to our chest. When I'm in a new group, I'm looking around saying, can I trust you? Is this a safe environment to open up? Our brains and our amygdala naturally are searching for cues, and we tend to be guard dogs naturally. I was just with a Georgia Tech football team, and we talked about this habitude. And here's our takeaway. Even though they have a lot of growing to do on Saturday, I watched that team say, with our opposition, we're guard dogs. With each other, we're guide dogs. We're going to be vulnerable. We're going to be transparent. We're going to not hold our cards close to our chest. We may be the first one in because we know our brains are looking for cues. Is this a safe place? Teams form out of groups when we start saying, I'm going to open up. One of the teams we've been so privileged to work with over the years is the Kansas City Royals ball club. So they have a half a dozen minor league clubs, and that's where they do habitudes. Way back in, I don't know, this is a decade ago or maybe 11 years. I go out to spring training in Arizona, and we're going to do a kickoff event. Vance Wilson, the AAA manager at the time, grabbed me and said, I need to tell you a story about what happened last year. I said, tell me. Well, I'm leading the weekly discussion in the clubhouse with this image, and he said, my third baseman, Mike, was just staring at the floor. He looked like he just wanted to get this thing over and go out and take batting practice. So I just went on with a discussion. But when the habitude discussion was over, the team ran out to take batting practice, all except for my third baseman. My third baseman walks up to me and says, "Coach, would you mind if I led the discussion next week?" And Coach Wilson said, "Oh, no, that'd be great. I didn't know you were paying attention. Absolutely, lead it next week." So the next week, Mike, the third baseman, steps up. He's quiet at first because he's searching for his words. And he's not a public speaker, he's a third baseman. But when he finally speaks, Don, here's what he says. "Do you all know what I got in my back pocket?" Nobody does, chewing tobacco, I don't know. And he reaches in his back pocket and he pulls out a noose. It's a rope he's going to hang himself with the very next weekend. He said, "I'm in a slump. I'm not going to make the majors. My girlfriend just broke up with me. My parents are mad at me. But last week, as we were talking, I suddenly realized, you guys are my family. This is my family right here." Well, you can imagine what that did to everybody else. He played guide dog. He tipped his hand and got vulnerable. Everybody just starts jumping in and talking about what they're anxious about and they're worried about it. And it just bonded them. And Coach Wilson said, "We went on and won the championship for AAA that year." And I'm not saying it was because they got close that they won, but I don't think you win unless you get close.
Right.
We've got to stop ourselves from being guard dogs all the time with our spouse, with our children, with our teams. And we got to tip our hand first and say, nobody may reciprocate, but I'm going to be a guide dog and tip my hand and be vulnerable.
I love it. And I will tell you, that is some powerful, powerful gear. I'll give you another one for you to use.
Okay.
We actually interviewed him just a couple of weeks ago. I'm just finishing a book with Scott Drew, the coach at Baylor.
Yes.
Who won the national basketball championship last year.
Yes. I love that guy. They love Habitudes too.
Yes. They're big fans.
Yeah.
So Coach Drew was sharing with me that last year during the bubble in Indianapolis, talk about intense, because you better like each other if you're going to spend that much time with each other.
Yeah, that's right.
But during this window, they were trying to come up with different exercises every day, something different, fun, whether it was a slam dunk contest in the hotel, or a chili making, whatever it was something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one day they decided to share their fears. Mm-hmm. And Coach Drew opened the conversation by saying, "Let me tell you, my great fear is that we're going to get to a game and the coach on the other side is going to be one of those big names.
Yeah.
One of those yell at the referee big names. And you're not going to get the call you deserve because I'm not big enough.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm not a legend in this sport. I'm just Scott Drew."
Wow.
Immediately, like the floodgates opened.
Yeah.
The players were saying, "Coach, that'll never happen. We'll never let that happen."
Yeah.
Then team leaders started saying, "Here's my fear." And as they began to pull out their vulnerability, Coach said from that point on, he had zero question that team was going to be ready to do whatever it took.
Wow. Wow.
To your point, powerful lesson.
He was a guide dog.
Right.
And I tell you what, coaches, that's hard because they're supposed to be large and in charge. And
right.
How cool for Scott to just say, "I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if I'm enough." Powerful.
Yeah. Something you said on the Andy Stanley podcast really caught my attention. You said, as a leader, sometimes you need to be quiet or just not in the room. Don't be afraid to step aside and let others influence. Boy, what a difficult thing that would be. All of us as leaders, we want to be in the mix.
Yes.
I mean, come on, I'm the leader.
Yes.
Tell me more about that and how someone might follow that kind of an exercise.
Well, that was a conversation about the paradox. Uncommon leaders are both visible and invisible. Everybody listening would understand at the beginning of any venture, you got to be visible. The leader needs to model the way, be the example. Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. But there comes a time in our journey where we need to be, our team needs us to be invisible, because if we're in the room, they won't step up. They won't speak up. They won't show up, maybe. My example on this one was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Between 55 and 63, he was a very, very visible leader in the civil rights movement. After that I Have a Dream speech, you start watching him intentionally step back, not because he didn't want to be responsible or he didn't want the labor. He realized that a young John Lewis might not speak up if he's in the room. So there was a time Dr. King didn't show up at a meeting. Young John Lewis, remember John Lewis just died recently as a very, very old and experienced congressperson. Mm-hmm. He calls Dr. King, said, Dr. King, you're not here. We need you here. And Dr. King goes, no, you don't. You know what to say, John. You do what you know to do. You speak up.
Boy.
Sometimes we train with our presence and sometimes we train with our absence. And so when we're quiet, all I'm saying is don't stop caring, but we do need to stop blaring. We need to stop being the people that are always saying, here's the answer, here's it. And Don, I have a trouble with that. I love to explain things. I want to teach things. Can you tell?
Yeah.
And I need to just shut up sometimes and let it happen.
Well, for those of you who cannot see the video of Tim, he is fully engaged, trust me, in every way. You know, Tim, I love doing these podcasts. I love getting a chance to pick the brains of great leaders, to learn lessons from them, and to try to find ways that those lessons can be applied into the lives of those who've chosen to spend this time with us. Last thing we love to do real quick is just kind of a quick either or.
Okay.
So got to ask you, are you a coffee guy or tea guy?
Oh, gosh. I think I was a tea guy for the first half of my adult life, but I've moved to a coffee guy now. Yeah.
Coffee. Good.
Yeah.
NFL or college football?
Oh, gosh. I love both, but I think I enjoy college a little bit better because anything can happen. Well, I guess anything can happen either place, but it's students.
Yeah.
Emotions are high and there's the 12th man on the stands in every game. So I think it's college.
Army versus Navy.
Oh, gosh. Well, I've got this West Point thing on. Savannah, I'm so sorry, but I got to go with Army on this one. But I love the Navy. I love all of our armed forces. Yes, I do.
For those who don't know it, our producer, Savannah's husband is a naval officer. And last, are you a technology guy or are you a pen and paper guy?
Anybody that knows me would say I'm pen and paper because I'm not hip. You know, you do not ask me to fix your computer. But my laptop, probably like you, is my BFF right now. So I take it with me everywhere I go and just lost it on a Delta flight.
Done that too?
Yeah, thank you. You made me feel better about myself. But I got it back. I got it back like 7 weeks later. Somebody had found it and came in from Arizona. So probably, I guess if I'm honest here, I'm a tech guy because I love my laptop and I take it with me just about everywhere I go.
I love it. Tim, how can people find you?
2 places, really. If someone's interested in what I do or to book an event or whatever, timelmore.com is the best place to reach me. It's a simple site, but you can interact there and find books and so forth. But Growing Leaders is the nonprofit that I lead that is our work with student athletes and schools and so forth. So if you're a next gen interested person, growingleaders.com would be the best place to find me there.
By the way, I'm not next gen, but I hope to be a leader and I grow because I learn from you.
Well, Don, I got to tell you, I feel the same way about you. I learn every time I'm with you. I've got notes with Don Yeager's name at the top. So please know I'm the same way. I love getting with you and learning from you.
Awesome. Tim, thank you today for being a corporate competitor.
My pleasure.
So I have to admit that the first time I heard Tim Elmore share habitudes, the ability to take 2 ideas and mix them together, a great picture in the middle, and make me think about where my mind was and my energy was flowing, I was riveted. But boy, his habitude discussion about, are you a thermometer or a thermostat? What a wonderful conversation today, and a great lesson, one I will think about in every room where I walk from here forward. Tim really, really caught my attention on the idea about how we do think in pictures, and that if we can make sure that there are good pictures stuck in our mind, how much better, how much more effective we're going to be. And I also love the idea that he was sharing the lessons he taught his very own children about having a high EQ and a high IQ, but at the same time, being willing to be both confident and humble. It's a paradox. It's one of the paradoxes he writes about, but can you be both? His argument is the greatest are all of that. And for as many times as we have asked the question about how to turn a group into a team, Tim's answer about actually realizing what your team needs and the fact that you cannot lead them properly until you get close enough to understand their needs was impactful to me in my leadership journey. loads of content, which is exactly why we do these conversations. Tim Elmore, what a star. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir.
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.